Hey everyone, Anders here with a video going over the latest Chrono Odyssey beta test. I played through the beta this weekend and put in about 30 hours total, so I'll do my best to break down the game and then give my thoughts at the end of this video. Now before we start, this video is not a sponsored video whatsoever, and I'm not here to just trash Chrono Odyssey nor shy away from the obvious flaws it has. So I'm going to break it down piece by piece, and if you're looking for a specific topic on this game, use the chapters to skip ahead to what you're most interested in. Hopefully I've covered it in this video. If not, leave me a comment down below. Now first, let's talk about what kind of game Chrono Odyssey is trying to be. It's marketed as a next generation action MMORPG. Game features include awe-inspiring visuals powered by Unreal Engine 5, a vast and intricately designed seamless open world, dynamic action-based combat mechanics based on time manipulation and extensive customization. This is what the Steam page describes the game as, but I think Chrono Odyssey really plays more like New World. More specifically, New World at launch. The core mechanics, the combat, the town layout, the life skills, all are very similar to New World. So right off the bat, if you didn't like New World when that came out, I don't think Chrono Odyssey will be the game for you. Next generation action MMORPG, I don't think this is it. If you played Black Desert, BDO is still king when it comes to action combat, at least in the MMO genre. Before it was put to rest, I think Terra was another Korean MMO that had great action combat. Chrono Odyssey honestly doesn't even get close to those two. That being said, I liked New World at launch. The combat was not an issue for me, and the same thing applies here. Chrono Odyssey combat is rough in terms of clunky animations, very vague stat and effect naming practices. Sometimes you'll see multiple names for the same effect depending on what weapon you're using. It's not clear what buffs stack, how damage is affected by defenses. This game does not really do a good job explaining how to play your class whatsoever, at least in this version of the game, but there's enough there where I can see the combat improving to the point of it easily surpassing New World. For weapons and skills, you are essentially given 3 skill trees per weapon. The left side will always be sort of one style of play for that weapon. The middle will always be your passives and basic buffs, and the right side will be the second style of play for that weapon. For bow, as an example, you deal more with direct damage on the left side of the tree, while the right side gives you access to amplifying your damage over time skills and the multiple types of arrows you can use. This applies to every weapon. You can mix and match, but you'll likely want to find a balance or a skill tree that complements your second weapon skill tree, because weapon swapping is crucial for maximizing damage. You have to use 2 weapons, and every class has access to 3 weapons. So of the 3, you want to focus on 2 of them. The more you actively use those weapons, the higher your mastery level for those weapons, which unlocks skill points for you to use in the skill tree. The good thing about this system is at least you can refund your skill points for free anytime you want, which lets you experiment with different builds and skills. As of this version of the game, there are no presets, so if you were to PvP, obviously you'd want to use different skills than the ones you have for PvE, and that would mean having to refund your skill tree partially and reallocate those points, which can be annoying and time consuming. Hopefully they add at least 2 presets in the future. For gear itself, weapons and armor can be crafted once you gain the blueprint of it, or if it's part of the default sets at each tier. Blueprints are obtained through quests or through dungeon drops, sometimes through dynamic events. Crafting your weapon will give you a random spread of GS and stats and effects. This also applies to almost all loot you get from the game. As an example, you can have an item drop with 16 GS and Dex and Strength stats as its main focus, while the same item can drop with 15 GS with a Vitality Wisdom stat spread instead, both even having different active effects as well. This means that crafting multiple of an item is going to likely be necessary. As you level, you really just want something decent for the basic damage boost you get with a higher GS weapon. You're not too fussed about getting the right stats and the right effect. Damage, according to the game, comes from the attack stat of your weapon and attributes like strength and dex. For survival, defenses on gear are vital, as well as the vitality attribute, which will give us more max HP. Effects on gear are also interesting in that they can be transferred to other pieces if you like the effect of one of your items. In the very beginning, as you go through the story, you're going to get a set of level 1 items that have pretty good PvE effects. We can transfer this effect to our new gear as long as we have the necessary materials and the new item does not already have an active effect of its own. A nice thing about this mechanic is that it allows you to transfer that effect to a higher rarity item, and it will not consume or destroy the source of the item effect. You can keep both items intact, and the item getting the new effect loses whatever white passive effect it had. More than likely that's okay, because you're just transferring the active effect because the old passive wasn't very good. On top of all of this, there is also item enhancing, and it's not really like the typical Korean MMO enhancing. It is guaranteed up to a max enhance rate for that rarity. So for green, you can only go up to +5. For epic, it's +7, and I'm sure it will increase for legendary items. You need specific enhancing stones to do this, which vary per rarity, and for the beta, we were limited to a daily NPC shop. I imagine they will just include it as a dungeon drop or rare drop from boss level monsters, but the main takeaway is that yes, enhancing is in the game, but it is guaranteed with no chance of failure as long as you have the materials needed to enhance that item. We also have sockets on some pieces of gear for gems, so gems so far in this game directly boost your weapon abilities. For example, you may have an epic greatsword gem that can be used on armor pieces. If you slot that gem into your armor socket, the skill it applies to will now have one more level added to it. This is not the same as investing one mastery point into that skill, just that the damage level of that skill increases. Epic gems increase abilities by 1, legendary gems increase that ability by 2 levels. I found from testing you cannot use 2 of the same gems at the same time, so even different rarity gems will not stack, so only 1 for each ability is working right now. In the beta, we only had armor gems, so we couldn't really test out weapon or accessory gems at all. Very basic implementation right now, but we know they are thinking about gem sockets, and hopefully they expand on that in the future. Gems, gear, materials, keys, quest items. I found that inventory bloat is a bit of a problem in this game. There were way too many items to keep track of. They need to simplify it a little bit, I think, but luckily there's also no inventory limit. There is, however, weight capacity limit, which can be increased via some accessory effects, and I'm sure maybe will be monetized in some way whenever this releases. Luckily, however, items you don't need can be salvaged, which give you partial raw materials as an exchange that are pretty useful for crafting other gear you actually need. There are different rarities for each piece of gear as well. Each rarity of gear is also level locked, so green gear needs to be level 5, blue gear needs to be level 15 to equip, with some exceptions where the ancestral set, for example, is an epic set, but able to be equipped at level 15. Epic gear normally needs you to be level 25, and legendary gear needs you to be level 40. For life skills, you can mine or gather anything you find. There's no need to be a certain life skill level. It will just take a lot longer, and you won't get as many items if you're using a lower level life tool. Life tools give you mastery, which increase your speed, and also your luck, which affects your gathering drops. There are also gear effects that manipulate the quantity of gathering drops you get as well. In terms of professions, we have weapon crafting, armor crafting, accessory crafting, alchemy, cooking, processing, butchering, gathering, logging, mining, and fishing. Crafting levels give you a higher chance to max out the GS of that item. So for example, when I crafted my ancestral armor piece, the range of the GS of that craft was 15 to 25. Crafting and processing are pretty straightforward. Get the materials you need from gathering and then you craft the item. Alchemy requires a lot of herbs, which you get from gathering. Extremely important life skill in my opinion, since it unlocks access to things like stronger potions, which is a must for solo play especially. The beta did not have sorcerer, which I believe is the only group healer class with the grimoire weapon, but alchemy also gives you damage boost elixirs, status ailment cleanses, just generally useful items for dungeons and bosses. Cooking again is extremely good. The buffs you get from them are essential. You lose all of your effects when you die, so if you die a lot to a boss, you're gonna need a lot of meals prepped and ready to go. Butchering is, I think, on the weaker side, at least on the beta, just because the sources for good meat are not really abundant enough compared to everything else, which makes crafting certain armor like light armor a bit more difficult than heavy armor, which needs just ores, which are more plentiful in the areas we have access to in the beta. Either that will be something that gets alleviated with the rest of the map, or they need to rebalance the materials needed for each type of armor set. Fishing is very useful for cooking and pretty simple as a minigame. We also have a camping tool you can use, which requires some wood to install. This will serve primarily as a healing area and also will give you the ability to use feasts, which I assume are party-wide food buffs. They weren't in the game when we tried it. If you want to party up and gather with someone else on the same node, only one of you will obtain materials, so unfortunately you can't party up together. This is not the case in party time portals. Inside those pieces of content, all members of the party can gather the same node and obtain materials. Nodes respawn in the same location shortly after it's been collected, which could lead to issues of botting when the game releases if they don't add some randomness to it. One thing I want to say about gathering before we move on, New World and Chrono Odyssey Odyssey have almost identical gathering styles, but New World did sound design for gathering, I think, much better than what is currently in the game for Chrono Odyssey. There is something hollow about logging a tree or mining an ore versus how it used to feel and sound like in New World. In Chrono, we don't see a profession XP rate go up, and the amount of materials you get seem kind of low for the size of the tree or ore node that you've gathered. Hopefully they can address that, but it's just a minor gripe. There's also an auction house in-game, which was pretty useless to me, to be honest. In this beta, they should probably move the NPC right across the blacksmith to start because it's a little out of the way. For sure, there are players who probably didn't even know there was an auction house during the playtest. Prices are not regulated, so almost nothing is worth buying in the beta because everything's inflated. You can buy food there, elixirs, weapons, armors, and accessories, but you can't buy blueprints or enhancement stones or any other time-gated materials. Most drops you get in this game are going to be BOE or bind unequipped, so you'll be able to sell a lot of the drops you don't need to the auction house. It uses gold currency, which is the main currency in the game. What you get from grinding monsters, quests, stuff like that. If you play BDO, you can think of it as silver. Same thing, no real money to gold transaction or mechanics that I can see so far. Of course, we also have the warehouse or storage. You can place all of your crafting materials here, and you'll be able to use them at the crafting stations without them being on your character. There's also an account-wide storage that allows you to transfer items like materials and gear to your alts. This only works, however, if your alt is on the same server as your main character. So if your main is on NA5, for example, your alts should also be on NA5 to take advantage of this feature. Speaking of alts, let's talk about classes now. There are 6 classes in the game right now. Each will have access to 3 weapons. Sorcerer will be able to use a staff, manosphere, and grimoire. Assassin will be able to use a saber, wrist blades, and musket. Paladin will be able to use a halberd, lance, and mace. Ranger can use a bow, crossbow, and rapier. Berserker can use chain blades, twin axes, and a battle axe. And swordsman can use dual blades, greatsword, and sword and shield. In this beta, we had access to only 3 of the 6, which were swordsman, ranger, and berserker. If I were to rank the 3 classes we got to test in terms of power level, I would say berserker and swordsman are very good, with berserker maybe being slightly better in PvE at this stage simply because of the health regen capabilities, but swordsman is crazy good damage with a lot of damage mitigation as well as the ability to tank and taunt. Great class. Swordsman was what I mained for the majority of this beta. Ranger I thought I would go with from the get-go, but after experiencing how clunky the combat is, I stuck to melee, and in some fights it actually felt like melee was just better overall, but in group play, Ranger felt very comfy. Before the beta ended, I was trying out Ranger with a rapier and crossbow weapon combination, and that combo of weapons was really fun. Feels like there's a lot of potential there, assuming they fix a lot of the issues I think they have with combat in general. Now let's talk about content. There are solo dungeons called Unknown Trials that will have you progress through different doors, fighting enemies, bosses, or doing puzzles. The further you get, the more rewards you obtain, and every entry costs you a key, which you can buy with some limitation on how many entries you get per day, with the added pressure, of course, of losing your key if you die inside the solo dungeon. It's basically a roguelike mode to see how far you can progress within the dungeon before you die. There are also time portals, which are smaller dungeons. You clear 4 packs of mobs, you kill a boss, and that's pretty much it. The real reason to do this is for the mining of a special ore in there that can be obtained here. The only other way to get this resource is by fighting a field boss, which may be hard to do for you early on, so this is a good alternative. The rewards are okay as well in the early stages of the game, and again, you'll need a key to enter here. There are also party versions of time portals that need different keys, which you can do solo or in a party and work the same as the solo versions of time portals. There's going to be 4 packs of monsters here, 1 boss, mining ores, but in the party, everyone can mine the same node. There are also puzzle dungeons called Unknown Labyrinth, which is solo content. You go through a labyrinth to escape the dungeon. Some platforming is going to be involved. Fairly simple until it's not, or the game kind of bugs out. You have to kind of give up and leave. I think it's a cool idea, just not well implemented at this stage with the performance issues. It can get a little boring. There's also a more standard party mini dungeon called Unknown Expeditions that requires up to 3 people to clear. Probably the hardest piece of content in the beta, but I did see some berserkers solo the dungeons themselves, obviously gearing up and utilizing some of the health regen mechanics that class has access to. Swordsman, I believe, could also solo it with proper damage mitigation and regen procs. We also have field bosses that drop special items. Some are not too bad. Others will absolutely destroy you. These can be classified as party content or group content, though you can solo this as a sword and shield or a class that has good mitigation and sustain. We also have region bosses like the Void Nexus and Titania Narnia. Void Nexus has multiple phases, and then the boss itself, Spada. It's a cool fight, a bit hectic, and of course clunky to say the least, but the rewards you get are pretty good, and it doesn't feel like it takes forever, which I appreciate. In the beta, the region bosses would respawn an hour after the last kill, but it would also frequently bug out and prevent you from even killing it in the first place, completely locking it out until there was a server reset or maintenance. This was particularly annoying because one of the main materials needed to craft primitive ingots drops from these bosses, and without that event, you're unable to craft those items. We also have bounties, which can be done solo or in party. These are essential and probably the first thing you want to focus on, because not only do bounties give you XP and gold and materials, but they give you permanent stats to your character. If you play BDO, you can think of them as very easy adventure logs. The more you do, the more stats you get, helping you progress through the story or other types of content. Unfortunately, some of the bounties are bugged, where after you find and defeat the target, you can't collect a head to complete the quest, but hopefully it's one of those things they fix as the game develops. You can use tokens from bounties to buy materials and some gear if you need. Of course, we also have the Chrono Gates, which are sort of the main focus, the main bosses for the campaign and the story. You meet the first one early on and will likely die to him since you won't really have any skills or gear or any idea of how to play your class. What is not apparent with these Chrono Gates is that they can be left at any time to retry in the future whenever you get stronger or feel more confident with your class. The first boss does not really make it clear enough that this is optional to beat him at that stage of the game, so I think that alone is going to cause some frustration, and I'm sure caused frustration for newer players who were just going in and not knowing that they could just leave and come back later when they had actual gear or knew their class better. Making it more clear that these types of content are optional and can be left at any time I think is needed, especially since you are right out of the tutorial with the first one. A prompt saying you can try the boss later and can leave to progress the story would be useful. In this beta especially, with the optimization issues, the combat clunkiness, having a boss wipe the floor with you like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, maybe not the best experience for those trying out your game for the first time. I didn't mind it personally, I didn't think it was that bad, but hopefully they address it in the future versions of the game. Chrono Gates also give you access to the bosses you defeat as summons, which you can utilize with your Chronotector. This Chronotector is a utility mechanic that allows you to manipulate time and enemies. One of these functions is the ability to summon bosses you have defeated for a short amount of time. You can find chrono enchantment tokens through exploration to gain points to amplify the effects of these functions. You'll get effects like letting your summon stay on the field longer, or giving you an attack boost when you use the time freeze function so you can deal extra damage to those monsters. You can also lower the gravity of your character so you can jump down from a very high place nice and slow without fearing you're going to take critical fall damage, and conversely you can jump really high, allowing you to reach higher than normal areas with ease. The first function you get is a sort of scanner, which allows you to uncover hidden quest objectives, and you get more as the campaign progresses. Story is honestly kind of an afterthought right now. The Void are sort of this generic evil demonic cosmic plague that infects worlds and devours them. Velia is from one of these worlds, and she's working with the God of Time to fight back against the Void. That's the game as I understood it from this beta. Now I kind of want to dive into more opinion or feedback portions of this video where I think the game is in severe need of rework and so on and so forth. So performance is what we're going to talk about first. It's using Unreal Engine 5, which means usually games that use this engine tend to look very nice, but are usually horribly optimized. With this beta, we didn't even really get the looks nice portion. It's kind of tragic that way, but I think this is absolutely fixable with enough time. Graphic settings were broken during the beta. Cinematic was really the only option to get a decent looking game, but the FPS tanks in this preset, so I used a mixture of cinematic and lower settings. It's not just the FPS as well. The game would drop frames like crazy as soon as any combat started, or if you were near other players. You may be seeing like 80 FPS, but it's dropping to 20 and stutters. It made the experience kind of unplayable at times. We didn't have any DLSS or FSR implementation, so I'm guessing with newer builds we'll see scalers help with the frame rate issues. Animations are poor, they need a lot of work, but if we assume that recent trailers are current builds of the game, then it seems like they are actually heading in the right direction, improving combat animation somewhat because they look a bit different than what we played. It won't ever be on the level of BDO, but something better than what it is now should be priority, and again I think it's something they can do and are doing with whatever current build they have. The bones of the game are actually not bad, but I think this beta was mostly an optics nightmare and not healthy for the game. Latency was terrible for me. I live in the Pacific Northwest of the US. I rarely saw my ping drop below 100. There was no label as to what servers were situated where when selecting your server, so that's something they should focus on. on NAS servers would be nice, especially with a focus on action combat. I played Ranger on EU with some friends, and I was hovering around 200 to 260 ping, which was noticeable of course, but weirdly because of all the other performance issues compared to NA, it wasn't much different than playing at 100, 120 ping. Visually, the game is at times very dark, too dark, then at other times it's way too bright. There was a point where the game couldn't render brightness correctly, and depending on how I was moving my camera, the illumination would change drastically. I got used to it, but not great. Your character can look very different depending on the lighting. It's just hard to even appreciate the armor or character you've created when the lighting is all over the place. Definitely something they need to work on. The style of the game is this sort of gothic, cosmic horror, undersaturated aesthetic, but compared to the trailer, the in-game cinematics are nowhere near as good. They don't really look like they are even made in Unreal Engine 5. The undersaturated look also kind of hurts the game because it becomes a bit boring to look at after hours of playing. I think more biomes, more monster variety, more color can help with this. In the very beginning, you get a scene of an attack at night, then a boss fight at night, then a foggy starting area on the beach. It's not until you get the Chronotector that the game actually gets a little bit of color, and I think that's a mistake because the first impression of the game, visually at least, is very poor. Customization is interesting. You have a lot of options, no gender lock on classes, which is good. You can make the most obscene looking characters you want. I'm all for that, but I found the creator to be a bit limiting when it comes to making nicer looking characters. I don't mind players who want to play hideous creatures. In fact, I think it kind of adds some levity to the game. Immersion breaking, maybe, but I'm not really big on immersion for MMOs. I don't really care if Shrek is in my party for a dungeon. I'm more worried about if Shrek knows a boss mechanic. Gear design is mediocre. They just look low quality. I recently played the alpha of the single player Vindictus game, which is also using Unreal Engine 5, and the detail on the outfits was incredible. Obviously, different kind of game, and Vindictus is funded by a huge company in Nexon, but I hope Chrono Studios puts a little bit more effort into letting the basic gear sets look better than they are right now. I would like to see them add a hide helmet option, give us glamour so we can keep basic sets that we like and customize our gear. Weapon design could also use some improvement. They're pretty basic right now. The capes or sashes could be better. The New World had awful looking gear, I thought, but Korean games tend to have better aesthetics than this, so maybe I'm being a bit harsh on that, but I was expecting better designs from a Korean developer. More cutscenes would be great if they want to make story a focus, but again, voice acting needs to be improved. It is currently awful. I switched to Korean just because it sounded better and not like an amateur voice actor or AI voice actors. Collectibles are something that I hope they add more of. We have the records you can collect, these pages, the chrono pillars, these jump puzzle chests, but overall the amount of collectibles felt lacking, and those pillars are cool, but they're all the same layout, so it gets boring very quickly. PvP I did very little of. You can duel and you can flag up for PvP, but in this beta there was no reason to do any PvP. You don't get anything extra. Maybe they add servers that are PvP on at all times, which would be cool to see, but considering the combat is lacking and the performance was so bad, maybe we'll see PvP once they fix those issues in the next few beta tests. Monetization wise, we know it's going to be a buy-to-play game. Other than that, we don't know much else. Life skills will have an energy system, it seems like. I suspect we will have a lot of monetized XP boosts for mastery, leveling, and other items, maybe weight capacity increase, but even if you get encumbered, you can still call your horse and ride at a normal speed, so that doesn't really matter. Mastery right now feels pretty weak and useless outside of the weapon mastery, of course. The only thing I can think of that would be egregious would be if they add a currency to buy gold or enhancing items. That would be a huge mistake. Attributes also I think need reworks. Strength gives damage and weight capacity, as well as physical defense, where Dex just gives you more relevant stats including damage. The attribute effects seem to be maybe placeholder honestly till they finalize how each class will function. Leveling up also feels too passive. You get attributes automatically allocated for you. I would like to see some more player agency, give us more freedom to make builds with different stat spreads. Questing is more freeform, which is okay, so there is a map exploration aspect that is encouraged and you get things like dynamic quests, but these give terrible rewards and are always the same quest. Either a wagon needs defending, NPC needs to be saved, cultists need to be killed, you get a chest that often gives you mediocre items. It needs to be fleshed out. There is one dynamic quest that I remember that was cool. It led to a boss fight, but they were mostly forgettable. Quest markers should also be improved, especially kill targets, because it is impossible to find them sometimes. There's no minimap in the game, which I think is a choice for, I'm guessing, immersion, but opening the map and having to zoom in feels clunky and immersion breaking anyway. anyway, so they need to figure that out. Dungeons need better rewards, especially the one dungeon we had in this beta. It rewarded gear that was likely worse than what you already had by that point. Also, adding a matchmaking system for dungeons and group content will be helpful for those that are not part of a guild or a consistent active friends group. The party finder also needs way more options and information to know what kind of party you're joining. It's way too basic right now. Locking on is available in combat, but it is absolutely terrible. Your camera will be on the ground because for the larger monsters, they lock on too low and you end up being unable to see anything. It needs a major rework. I just stopped using it altogether. Gear progression is also very bad right now. The game feels harder to play before you hit level 15, and then it just becomes way too easy. Where a boss was making me play more methodically before level 15, after level 15 and being able to use blue gear, I could simply auto attack to win. Monster AI needs a lot of work as well. They are either too passive or too aggressive, where in the beginning, being swarmed by monsters will likely mean you would die. After level 15, they're more of a nuisance than anything. The damage difference could be because of our limited regions in the beta, but I think the AI still needs work regardless. Summons are also part of this. The AI for summons is very buggy, and they will just stand there not doing anything if you're too far away or the monster it's just not close enough. Even though the later summons you get are technically stronger, they ended up being weaker because they would just unleash one attack and leave, and they would likely miss that attack anyway. Group content needs to be improved, more dungeons, maybe make time portals a group activity exclusively. Unknown labyrinths could be a group activity as well. It just felt like there were limited options for us to play as we progressed in a group. If it wasn't a field boss or the party time portals, maybe region bosses or bounties, you're just too limited for what an MMO is supposed to be playing with a group. Overall, I would say this beta playtest should have been called maybe a network stress test, and the marketing push they did recently should have been saved for closer to release. The optics have been a complete mess with an overall negative backlash, of course, rightfully so, and the CEO even having to make excuses for why the state of the game was this way. Regardless though, there's going to be more beta tests coming up with, I'm assuming, newer versions of this game, so I'm sure things will improve, and personally I'm going to give it a try because I think established MMOs need competition. So despite all the flaws and the strange marketing choices made for Chrono Odyssey, we need these new MMOs to at least partially succeed, but that also means we need to call out when those games are simply bad or trying to gaslight the community by just making up excuses. It's that simple. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think about Chrono Odyssey. If you played the beta, did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Let me know your experiences in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.